I'm so glad you're here with us today. We're diving deep into A Course in Miracles, and if you're just joining our community, you might be wondering what this course is all about. I'd love to invite you to check out the very first video on this channel, where I break down exactly what A Course in Miracles is, how it came to exist, and why it's been transforming lives for over 5 decades. It'll give you the perfect foundation for everything we explore together here. Now, today we're exploring something truly beautiful. The final section of Chapter 7, the state of grace. And I want you to think about the word grace for a moment. What comes to mind? For most of us, grace carries religious connotations. We think of it as something God grants to the worthy, something you receive if you've been good enough, something that descends upon you in special moments if you're lucky. We think of grace as extraordinary, as rare, as something you have to earn through devotion or prayer or righteous living. But what if everything you've been taught about grace is wrong? What if grace isn't something you earn or achieve or receive on special occasions? What if grace isn't a reward for good behavior or a gift given to the chosen few? What if grace is actually your natural state, the condition you've always been in, the reality of who you are right now in this very moment? This is what the Course is about to reveal to you, and it's going to challenge everything you thought you knew about your relationship with God, with yourself, and with life itself. Because the truth is, you are in a state of grace right now, not because you've done anything to deserve it, not because you've finally become spiritual enough or pure enough or worthy enough, but simply because grace is what you are. It's your nature. It's your reality. It's the truth that's always been true about you. Even when you didn't know it, even when you didn't believe it, even when you were convinced you were separate from God. And here's why this matters so much. Most of us are exhausted from trying to earn grace. We're tired of striving to be good enough, spiritual enough, worthy enough. We're worn out from the constant effort to prove ourselves, to make ourselves acceptable, to finally reach that place where we deserve God's love. We've been living as if we're outside of grace, trying desperately to get back in, not realizing that we never left. We've been knocking on a door that was never closed, begging for entry into a home we never actually departed from. The ego has convinced you that you fell from grace, that you lost it, that you need to climb your way back to it through effort and sacrifice and perfect behavior. And this belief has kept you trapped in a cycle of striving and failing, achieving and losing, getting close and falling away. It's kept you living in constant anxiety about whether you're doing enough, being enough, whether God is pleased with you or disappointed in you, whether you're in His favor or outside of it. But Section 11 is going to shatter all of that. It's going to show you that grace is not a state you achieve. It's a state you accept. It's not something that comes and goes based on your behavior. It's constant, unchanging, eternally present. And the only thing that's ever been blocking your experience of grace is your belief that you don't have it. Your conviction that you're somehow outside of God's love. Your insistence on seeing yourself as separate from the very source that created you. So today, we're going to explore what grace actually is according to the Course. We're going to look at the difference between living in grace and living in the ego. We're going to understand why accepting grace is really just accepting yourself as you truly are. And we're going to discover what happens when you finally stop trying to earn what's already yours and simply allow yourself to receive it. This might be one of the most liberating teachings in the entire Course. Because once you understand that you're already in a state of grace, that you've never left it and you never could, everything changes. The striving stops. The anxiety releases, the exhaustion lifts, and you finally come home to the truth that's been waiting for you all along. Let's begin. Let's start by clearing away all the misconceptions about grace, because if you're like most people, you've been taught something about grace that's fundamentally wrong, and this wrong teaching has kept you from experiencing what's actually always been yours. In traditional religious thinking, grace is often presented as something God gives to certain people at certain times. It's portrayed as a divine favor, a special blessing, something that descends from above, when God decides you're worthy of it. Grace becomes this mysterious force that you hope for, pray for, and try to earn through good deeds and righteous living. It's painted as extraordinary, as exceptional, as something that happens to the lucky few who've managed to please God enough. But the Course teaches something radically different. According to A Course in Miracles, grace is not a special gift. Grace is not something God grants to some and withholds from others. Grace is not dependent on your behavior or your worthiness or your spiritual achievements. Grace is simply your natural state. It's the condition you're in right now and have always been in. It's the reality of your existence as God's creation. Think about what this means. You didn't have to do anything to be in a state of grace. You don't have to maintain it through perfect behavior. You can't lose it through mistakes or sins or failures. Grace is not something that comes and goes. It's not something you fall in and out of. It's constant. It's unchanging. It's as permanent and unalterable as your existence itself. Why? Because grace is intimately connected to your true identity. You are God's creation. You are loved infinitely and unconditionally. You are whole, complete, and perfect in your true nature. And all of this is grace. Grace is the state of being loved by God, of being held in His awareness, of being exactly who He created you to be. And since God doesn't change His mind, since His love doesn't fluctuate, since your true nature as His creation is eternal and unchangeable, grace is constant. The Course is telling you that you've never been outside of grace. You've never fallen from it. You've never lost God's favor. You've never been separate from His love. All of that is ego mythology. All of that is the story the ego tells to keep you feeling small, guilty, unworthy, and desperate to earn your way back to a place you never actually left. Grace is not earned. Grace is not achieved. Grace is not awarded. Grace is recognized. Grace is accepted. Grace is allowed. You're already in it. You've always been in it. The only question is whether you're going to believe it and accept it, or whether you're going to keep listening to the ego's lies that tell you you're outside of God's love and need to work your way back in. And here's what makes this so beautiful. When you understand that grace is your natural state, it completely transforms how you relate to yourself and to God. You stop trying to earn love that's already yours. You stop performing for approval you already have. You stop striving to become worthy when you're already infinitely valued. The exhausting effort to prove yourself stops because there's nothing to prove. You're already exactly what God created you to be, and that is grace. This doesn't mean you're perfect in the ego sense. It doesn't mean you never make mistakes or never struggle. It means that beneath all the ego confusion, beneath all the fear and guilt and unworthiness, your true nature remains untouched, unchanged, in a permanent state of grace. And when you begin to identify with that truth rather than with the ego's story, everything shifts. You stop living from lack and start living from wholeness. You stop begging for love and start extending the love you already have. You stop trying to get into grace and start living from the grace you're already in. This is what grace actually is, not a reward, not a gift you might receive, but the reality of who you are right now. Now let's talk about what it actually looks like to live in these two completely different states, because the difference between living in grace and living in the ego is like the difference between night and day. And once you see this contrast clearly, you'll be able to recognize which state you're operating from in any given moment. When you're living in the ego, everything is effort. Everything is struggle. Everything requires constant vigilance, constant work, constant proving. You wake up every day with a sense that you need to earn your place in the world. You need to prove your worth. You need to justify your existence. You're constantly measuring yourself against others, constantly worried about whether you're doing enough, being enough, achieving enough. There's no rest in the ego. There's no peace. There's only the endless treadmill of trying to become acceptable, trying to finally arrive at a place where you can relax and feel worthy. Living in the ego means living in fear. Fear that you're not enough. Fear that you'll be found out. fear that you'll fail, fear that you'll lose what you have, fear that others will see through your performance and discover that you're fundamentally flawed. The ego keeps you in a state of constant anxiety because its entire existence depends on you believing you're separate from God, separate from love, separate from grace. And that separation creates a persistent sense of danger, of vulnerability, of needing to protect yourself. But when you're living in grace, everything changes. When you accept that you're already whole, already loved, already complete, the striving stops. The fear releases. The constant effort to prove yourself dissolves. You wake up knowing that you don't have to earn your place because you already have it. You don't have to prove your worth because it's already established. You don't have to justify your existence because your existence itself is the gift. Living in grace means living in trust. Trust that you're held. Trust that you're loved. Trust that you're guided. You're not anxiously trying to control every outcome because you know you're supported by something far greater than your small self. You're not desperately grasping at security because you feel secure in your identity as God's creation. You're not performing for approval because you already have God's infinite approval simply by being who you are. Here's how you can tell which state you're in. If you're efforting, you're in the ego. If you're straining, you're in the ego. If you're anxiously trying to make something happen, you're in the ego. If you feel like you're pushing a boulder uphill, you're in the ego. Because grace is effortless. Grace flows. Grace unfolds naturally. Grace doesn't require you to force anything, because grace is simply the natural expression of your true nature. This doesn't mean you don't take action when you're in grace. It doesn't mean you become passive or lazy. It means your action comes from a completely different place. Instead of acting from fear, you act from love. Instead of acting from lack, you act from abundance. Instead of acting to prove something, you act as an expression of what you already are. And that kind of action feels completely different. It feels light. It feels natural. It feels aligned. The ego blocks your awareness of grace by constantly directing your attention to what's wrong, what's missing, what needs to be fixed. The ego keeps you focused on your inadequacies, your failures, your unworthiness. It replays your mistakes endlessly. It predicts future disasters. It compares you unfavorably to others. And as long as you're listening to this voice, you can't experience the grace that's already present because your attention is completely absorbed in the ego's story of lack and separation. But when you accept grace, when you choose to identify with your true nature instead of the ego's false identity, your entire perception shifts. You start seeing yourself differently. You start seeing others differently. You start seeing situations differently. What looked like problems begin to look like opportunities. What felt like threats begin to feel like invitations to trust. What seemed like evidence of your unworthiness begins to dissolve in the light of your recognition that you're already loved. Already whole, already home. Living in grace means you stop trying to get somewhere and you start being where you are. You stop trying to become something and you start accepting what you already are. You stop pushing against reality and you start flowing with it. And in that flow, in that acceptance, in that trust, you discover a peace that the ego can't touch. A joy that doesn't depend on circumstances. A wholeness that nothing external can give you or take away. So we've established what grace is and what it looks like to live in it. But now we come to the most important question. How do you actually accept your place in grace? Because here's the thing, you can understand grace intellectually. You can agree with everything we've said, but until you actually accept it, until you allow it to become your lived experience, it remains just a beautiful concept that doesn't transform your life. And here's what's so interesting. The only thing keeping you from experiencing grace is your resistance to it. You're resisting grace right now, not intentionally, not consciously, but you are. And that resistance is actually resistance to yourself. When you resist grace, you're resisting the truth of who you are. You're resisting your own wholeness. You're resisting your own worthiness. You're resisting the love that created you and sustains you in every moment. Why do we resist grace? Because accepting grace means letting go of the ego's entire story. It means releasing the identity you've built around being unworthy, around needing to prove yourself, around struggling to become acceptable. And as painful as that identity is, it's familiar. You know how to be the person who's trying to earn love. You know how to be the person who's not quite good enough yet. You know how to be the person who's working toward worthiness. But being the person who's already whole, already loved, already in grace, that's terrifying to the ego because it means the ego's entire purpose disappears. The ego will give you 1,000 reasons why you can't accept grace. It'll say, but you've made too many mistakes, but you've hurt people, but you're still struggling with that addiction, that anger, that fear, but you're not spiritual enough yet, but you haven't meditated enough, prayed enough, studied enough. The ego will always find evidence that you're not ready for grace, that you need to work harder first, that you need to fix yourself before you can accept that you're already whole. But here's the truth. There is no requirement for accepting grace except willingness. That's it, just willingness. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be free from all problems or conflicts or struggles. You just have to be willing to consider that maybe, just maybe, you're already loved, already whole, already in a state of grace right now, exactly as you are, with all your imperfections and struggles and confusion. Willingness is the key that unlocks everything. When you become willing to accept grace, when you stop insisting that you're unworthy and you open yourself to the possibility that God's love for you is unconditional and unchanging, something shifts. Your perception begins to transform. You start seeing yourself through the eyes of love rather than through the eyes of judgment. You start recognizing that your mistakes don't define you, that your struggles don't disqualify you, that your humanity doesn't separate you from grace. And here's what happens when you accept your place in grace. Everything changes. Not necessarily your external circumstances, but your experience of those circumstances. When you're living from grace, challenges don't threaten your worth. Failures don't confirm your inadequacy. Other people's opinions don't determine your value. You're anchored in something so much deeper, so much more stable, so much more real than anything the external world can give you or take away. Grace transforms your perception of everything. When you know you're in grace, you stop seeing the world as a threatening place where you need to fight for your survival and prove your worth. You start seeing it as a place where you're held, guided, and loved. You stop seeing other people as competitors or threats, and you start seeing them as fellow creations of God, equally held in grace whether they know it or not. You stop seeing circumstances as evidence of your failure or success, and you start seeing them as opportunities to express the love you already are. Living in grace means you show up to your life differently. You speak differently. You act differently. You respond to challenges differently, not because you're trying to be a better person, but because you're finally accepting the truth of who you already are. And from that acceptance, love flows naturally. Kindness emerges effortlessly. Peace becomes your default state, not because you've achieved some high spiritual status, but because you've stopped blocking the grace that was always there. So the practical application is this. Start noticing when you're resisting grace. Notice when you're telling yourself you're not worthy yet. Notice when you're insisting you need to do more before you deserve love. Notice when you're rejecting peace because you think you haven't earned it. And in those moments, practice willingness. Say to yourself, I'm willing to accept that I'm in a state of grace right now. I'm willing to consider that I'm already loved, already whole, already home. That's all. Just that willingness opens the door. And grace, which has been waiting patiently all along, rushes in to fill you with the truth you've been seeking everywhere else. So here we are, at the end of our exploration of grace, and I hope something has fundamentally shifted in how you see yourself. I hope you're beginning to recognize that you're not outside of God's love, trying to find your way back in. You're not fallen. You're not separate. You're not unworthy. You are in a state of grace right now, in this very moment, exactly as you are. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to achieve it. You don't have to prove yourself worthy of it. Grace is your natural state. It's who you are. It's what you've always been. And the only thing that's ever been between you and the experience of grace is your belief that you don't have it, your insistence on seeing yourself as the ego sees you rather than as God sees you. So today, right now, you have a choice. You can keep living in the exhausting effort of trying to earn what's already yours, or you can accept it. You can open yourself to the possibility that you're already loved, already whole, already held in the infinite embrace of the one who created you. And that acceptance, that willingness, that simple yes to grace, changes everything. If this video touched something in you, if it helped you see grace in a new way, if it gave you permission to finally accept that you're worthy of love simply because you exist, I'd be so grateful if you take a moment to give it a like. It helps this message reach more people who need to hear that they're already in grace, and it lets me know these teachings are serving you. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. We're here every single day, exploring A Course in Miracles together, peeling back the layers of ego confusion and revealing the grace that's always been present underneath. I'd also love it if you'd share this video with someone who needs this message today. Someone who's exhausted from trying to earn God's love. Someone who feels unworthy. Someone who needs to remember that they're already in a state of grace and they always have been. And please, leave a comment below. Tell me what shifted for you today. Tell me where you've been resisting grace in your own life. Tell me what becomes possible when you accept that you're already whole, already loved, already home. I read every comment, and your reflections create such a beautiful space of shared awakening. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Thank you for your willingness to see yourself differently. Thank you for being open to the truth that you're in a state of grace right now. You don't have to do anything to deserve it. You just have to accept it. And that acceptance is the beginning of everything. I'll see you tomorrow with another deep dive into the Course. Until then, live from grace. It's already yours.